Hello, everyone. This is Coca Sexton with InsideView. Again, thank you so much for attending today's Social Selling University webinar. It's always nice to see the attendee list and see so many familiar names. Today we have a great webinar for you. We have two well-known and respected experts in their fields, Barber and Kent Gregoire, that are actually forming a new company, and I'll have them explain that to you. As I mentioned, this webinar will be recorded, and if you are interested, we will publish this on our LinkedIn group as well as within our InsideView community for you to view at a later date. But I wanted to hand this over to Barbara and to Kent, who are going to explain to us, how these social businesses are gaining momentum and what you as sales teams and managers can adjust for that. Here you go, Barbara.
All right, Coca, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here with my pals from InsideView, and very excited about the opportunity for Kent and I to share some thoughts around social business and what that really means to driving sales and revenue opportunities. Briefly, what you should all know about me is I am the co-author of the book, The New Handshake, Sales Meets Social Media, and I'm also the Executive Vice President of Sales and Social Media for our new company that Kent and I have formed called Social-Centered Selling. This is the work we've been doing together for quite some time now, and just decided that we needed to kind of co-join forces and come up with a really strong name that illustrated clearly what we did. I also have background in sales, been selling professionally for close to 30 years for some companies that you would recognize, like Microsoft, where I ran a national sales team, as well as have strength and background in technology, and have been using social technologies in my own business and helping clients drive revenue opportunities for about 7 years now. So really excited to be here. I am at Barber if you are tweeting, and please feel free to use our hashtag #SocialSellExcel. Kent, tell everybody a little bit about you.
Kent Gregoire, it's really great to speak with you from Atlanta. What you should know about me is I've enjoyed more than 2 decades of experience helping organizations supercharge their sales efforts. I continue to do this work with organizations and sales teams to incorporate both proven sales performance systems as well as social media strategies, working closely with Barber. And I've served as chief executive of more than a dozen fast growth companies and serve as chief executive and sales strategist of our new company, Social-Centered Selling. Barbara?
Cool. Well, let's talk about why we're here. So, Kent, you're going to be helping me to advance the slides. So let's show everybody what we're going to be talking about in our time together. So, and I want to encourage you, and I know Coca and we'll be watching for questions, but feel free to chat in questions, and we'll certainly try to take those throughout the broadcast as we can. So here's what we're going to do in our short time together. We're really going to share with you some strategies that will help you as professional sales folks create, maintain, and leverage relationships at the executive level, while also tapping the immense power of social media.
Barbara, it sounds like you might have dropped off. Are you still on the phone?
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that. I think that was user error, not technology error. I must have hit the mute button. Sorry about that. So, Ken, if you can go ahead and move us forward, let's talk about the fact that great sales skills plus social media these days really is all about social business. And, as we keep moving forward, what we're going to talk about today, we'll share with you the agenda here in just a second. All right, so we're going to talk about this marriage of great selling skills and social media, and we are going to spend a little bit of time weaving in some thoughts and research from a very solid methodology called Sell Excel, which Kent will be speaking to. The bottom line, what we really want everyone to get from this is an understanding that leveraging social technology is really one part of the equation. It's very important that you and your people also have great selling skills, and we're going to talk about how some of those selling skills may need to evolve a little bit. So throughout the course of our conversation this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are in the world, we're going to talk about what social business really means for sales and why it's so critical to ditch that pitch. We're going to chat with you about the things that you want to ask, the questions you want to ask and as an executive to gain insight, but it's also important to be very clear what you do not want to ask, because ultimately our goal these days is to really be perceived as that trusted advisor so that we secure access over and over again inside the organization. And certainly we're going to cover some tips and tricks for using social to your advantage. One of the things that I really love about this came from an IBM study, and we're finding that those organizations who give their people the capability to use social and collaborative tools both inside and outside the organization are the ones that are really seeing strong success in this new world of social business. I mean, let's face it, for anyone who's been selling for a long period of time, you know this to be true. People aren't buying from companies, they buy from other people. And so it's all about creating those relationships. And in fact, now with the advent of social media, we're not marketing to segments, we're marketing to individuals and people. And so it's really important that we continue to think about how that fits into our overall sales activities.
Barb, quick question about that. In your
Sure.
experience, and maybe Kent might be able to give some insights to this as well, what do you find is holding companies back from being a part of this new evolution of what salespeople can be leveraging as far as social media and other tools?
Yeah, I think it is an excellent question, Coca. Based on my own experience, I think it's like any change, and I've seen this throughout the years selling technology solutions, and even just in my own experience as a business owner, evangelizing this for the last few years. When some years ago people thought I was pretty nuts. I think change is difficult. I think people get very used to a certain way of doing business. I think that there's a tendency to think, well, the way we've always sold has worked for us, so why change? And really the reality is, if you're really truly honest with yourself, a lot of the approaches that you've perhaps used in the past that did lead to success are now not the things that lead to the kind of success we now see. Now, I'm about to go out on a limb here and be radical, Coca, but I don't believe in cold calling, and that's one of the things that I think some sales teams are having a hard time letting go of. And then I guess it's just the natural fear of change, right? This is a new way to learn, new tools to learn, new thinking about how we converse with each other. So I think it's a little bit scary and easy to just stay sort of stuck in what you've always done.
Yeah, and I don't find it as being radical, the whole notion of not wanting to cold call. I think that in most sales environments, there's always going to be some element of that. But I think there is a transition that takes place when a company is so focused on this is how you build your pipeline to moving into this new world. It can't happen overnight. So I do think that there will be companies that start moving into this, but I'm glad that you had some insights as to why companies are initially afraid to even venture into this space.
Well, sure. I mean, it's just like anything in us. I mean, come on, Cook. I've been around long enough to know that, I remember when people said we'd never do business over email, right? And so I just think that, whenever there's some sort of a change in the environment, that makes people a little bit nervous. And so hopefully by the time we have this session, and as well as, others as we engage in a series of sessions with InsideView, we'll help people to realize that, while it might be a little scary, the reality is you got to get on board, because this is the way business is being done. And so, it's better if you get on sooner rather than later. So with that in mind, what we want people to think about when they're listening into this session is that the conversation has begun without you. And we know for a fact that there is very solid research out there now from Harvard Business Review, from Gartner, and others, that Buyer 2.0, if you will, really is starting that online conversation. And as we move forward, you'll see the percentage is really fairly shocking in terms of what this looks like. And so I want people to get their head around this. So Ken, if you could just go ahead and move forward, that would be great. So 80% of buyers, and Coca, we've talked about this, and I know this is no big surprise to you, but we know that 80% of buyers, and this is business-to-business buyers, are going online. Kent's going to talk about some research from Sell Excel. They're going online. They start the sales process without us. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, are you standing out? Do you have a strong online presence? And is that presence compelling enough for someone to want to talk to you? I'll share a quick story. This happens to me all the time, and actually we can, as we look at the next slide, I'll talk to you about this story. You know, both Kent and I have been in this situation, and it's happened to me several different times. A recent engagement with a client, recommendation from a colleague. These folks were really well respected, but they still didn't call me. The very first thing that they did is they went to my LinkedIn profile. They looked me up on Twitter and Facebook. They Googled me. They read the blog. They went to the website. They watched the videos. That is an example of what is happening all the time, my friends, and it's very possible that you are being locked out of opportunities without even knowing it. So I want you to realize that the buyer owns that process. They are leveraging the social web to do their homework, and they are expecting immediate value, compelling content, share great white papers, you know, video tips, whatever it might be, but they're looking for something from you to demonstrate the value they're going to receive, right? You are creating advanced credibility, so they need to know what are they going to receive if they start working with you. And then that leads into the importance of recognizing that you gotta ditch the pitch. You know, you just cannot go into an executive's office, the decision maker's office, and just rattle off a feature dump. It's just not how it's done anymore. In the beginning, when we needed to educate buyers, that was one thing, but my gosh, you need to know as much about them as they likely know about you, and we're going to talk about some of the research tools that we use and that I'm super passionate about. So social media has really impacted sales, and you know, what I want you to think about is this quote that Axel Schulte was so kind enough to give me for the book. And it's true, whatever approach you were using, you know, it really is just not effective anymore. Those canned speeches and the scripts, they really are not what your buyer's looking for. So you need to be very visible, very proactively engaged, and patient as you are leveraging social media as part of the overall process. But here's a problem. Right now, as Coca even alluded to, there is a big disconnect. And often what I'm seeing right now in the landscape today is that the buying cycle, right, and the sales cycle are not always corresponding. And so as I now hand the reins over to Kent, we're going to talk about what you can do about that, both from a sales skills perspective as well as utilizing social technology to help drive those revenue opportunities forward.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. You know, selling at the executive level, Barber opened it up, and it's best known as Sell Excel. It is a tested and proven sales methodology, and what I'd like to do is to talk with you about some of the research that was done to create the methodology, because in the findings of this research, there are some real gems here for you. So first of all, the developer objective, the developer of this methodology, his objective was to research projects, was to determine how salespeople become perceived as trusted advisors by the client executives they interfaced with. The research projects were very extensive and over time actually included various parts of the globe. The four key areas of the research study focused in on these general questions. When and why did executives get involved in the decision process for major purchases? And then what has to happen in those meetings with salespeople for the executive to feel it was effective? How do salespeople establish trust and credibility at the executive level and thereby securing return access? Many salespeople get very frustrated thinking, wow, I've got this great meeting with a senior level executive only to find out that they're pushed down. So we'll talk about that. And what are executives looking for in a strategic relationship with buyers? So I'll continue to talk about these as we go out today, and Barbara will as well, to answer these questions and more. The first one, when and why do senior level executives get involved in the decision process for major purchases? Well, at the bottom here, you can see some various steps in the buying cycle. And if you take a look at these, they may not be identical to your particular company. However, they are pretty common when selling at the executive level. So do executives get involved early? Do they get involved middle? Or do they get involved late in the buying process? Well, as some of you might suspect, they get involved early in the process to establish objectives and set strategy. They also get involved late to measure the implementation and the results. But executives tend to delegate down the middle steps to lower levels in the organization. So if you're trying to get to a senior executive in the middle of a buying process, you might have a difficult time unless you've already established a relationship with that executive. And why is it so important that we're establishing those relationships? Well, we want to get involved in establishing objectives and setting strategy. If an RFP is going to be issued, we want to be involved in assisting in writing the RFP versus simply the recipient of the RFP. And of course, there are many other advantages to selling at the executive level. When working with executives, it's important that we consistently ask ourselves 3 compelling questions during any sales campaign. We want to be asking these throughout, in other words, at multiple times. And the answers to these questions can be more easily obtained if you're dealing with senior executives in the client organization. The first one is, should we pursue this opportunity? What's happening in the client environment that's creating the need for change, that's creating the need for our solution? Can we effectively compete for this opportunity? Do we have a solution that can be integrated into the client's environment, and can we articulate the specific business value of our solution? And can we reasonably expect to win this opportunity? Are we aligned with the most powerful people in the client organization who can help us win this deal? We're going to talk a little bit more about that one. The first piece that I'd like to talk about is targeting the right executive. You know, what I tell salespeople is don't be intimidated by the rank and file. Executives are less concerned about your rank and file and more concerned about the value you can deliver to them. There's a concept that we feel is very important, and that concept is known as the relevant executive. Who is the relevant executive? Is it the economic buyer? Is it the decision maker? Is it the person in the client organization who has access to funds? The way that we define the relevant executive is it's the executive who stands to gain the most or lose the most by the outcome of the project or application associated with the sales opportunity. And it's interesting, you know, think a moment about the deals that you've won and think about the deals that you've lost. Were you aligned with the relevant executive for the sales opportunity you were pursuing? And if you were not, you probably lost the deal. So how to gain access? Many times, you know, there are various ways we can gain access in organizations, but based on the research, assuming your company was considering a major purchase, how likely would you be to schedule a meeting with a salesperson if the request came from someone inside the organization? 84% of the time, an executive is going to accept a meeting. And if it's a referral from outside the organization, a consultant, a business partner, someone from outside, 44% of the time. So as we can see, this also matches up really well with some of the conversations Barber has started and will continue to have around the social media and getting higher levels of engagement directly with these individuals. So learning about your clients, you know, an in-depth knowledge about your clients is the fastest way to create a collaborative relationship. Client learning occurs at 3 levels: the client's industry, the client's company. You want to know about your client's customers and your client's competitors, and the client executive. You know, most client executives insist that you have a certain base level of knowledge about their industry. They want you to be able to talk their language and their key metrics and understand the challenges that they may be facing. Within their company, it's really important that you understand their company so that you have the ability to suggest new ideas and solutions. At this level of learning, you'll be able to provide business value to the client's organization. But you know, your client's customers, when researching your client's company, you really want to understand the challenges that their customers are having, because that provides us great insight, as well as how is the company faring against the competition. And lastly, the client executive. At this level of client learning, when you know a lot about the executive, you are in a unique position to provide extraordinary value. So now you've already learned some shortcuts. Barbara's kind of started in that process, and she's going to continue developing those throughout the next several minutes. What I'd like to show you is on your client's industry. You know, think about the sources where you might go. Business.com, your client's company, InsideView, and client executives, LinkedIn. So those are just some common examples, and I suspect most of us on this call are using those on a regular basis. Barbara?
Thanks, Kent. Well, as we move forward and we take a look at some research tools, well, I'm a huge fan of InsideView, and you know, I have been using their tool for the past year myself, and I absolutely love it. I think using that in conjunction with LinkedIn is a must. So if you just go ahead and a couple clicks, Kent, we'll just bring it up. So, you know, InsideView gives you tremendous information about the companies that you're targeting, as well as utilizing company pages within LinkedIn in order to gather more detail and information about the individual, the company. And then lastly, don't underestimate the power of Google searches. You know, I thought for a long time I really knew how to move those Google searches forward, and I found that there were lots of things that I had to learn, but there's a tremendous amount of information out there. And again, Ken, just go ahead and build on the slide so they can see all of it. There we go, perfect. So what you want to be doing, I mean, you should never walk into a sales meeting without being prepared. That's a given. That's the way it's always been. Today, in my personal opinion, it's even more inexcusable for a salesperson to go in completely unprepared. There is so much great information available to you. And again, my tools, I'm using LinkedIn and I'm using InsideView together to really gather a lot of good detail about organizations and the people in them. You know, you can follow companies, you can follow the individuals, you can get real-time alerts. These things really set you apart from the competition and allow you to have a much richer conversation when you sit down with that executive. Because I ask you, what's the better approach, right? If I come in, and it's the way we were taught, so I'm not criticizing that things have evolved now. You know, now we don't need to walk into an executive's office and use that meeting, say, well, hey, you know, what keeps you up at night in your business? Kent's going to talk about this a little bit more, but we can use social technology to look for those drivers. And isn't it much more effective if I walk into an executive's office and I say, gosh, I've been noticing that you've really had some issues with your software. You're sort of getting hammered out there in the press. You know, what are you doing about that? How are you handling that in the face of such pressure? You know, that's a whole different type of conversation. So as we look at tools like LinkedIn and others, you know, LinkedIn for B2B salespeople, this is a powerhouse of information, and it is the tool that I use on a daily basis. And I'm going to talk with you about some things that you can do to really leverage this to your advantage, maybe in deeper ways than you thought of. So I'm going to share the basics right now, and interesting enough, a lot of times people miss the basics. First of all, keep in mind that people are researching and looking for the products and services that you are selling. When they show up on your LinkedIn profile, you have to ask yourself, what message are you sending? Is there enough information there in your summary and in your experience to tell people what you do and what results companies get when they work with you? I cannot tell you. I looked at some profiles this morning. You know, people always ask me, can you just kind of take a quick look? And I looked at some profiles this morning and I said to myself, wow, if I was the buyer, I don't have one clue what they do, because all they had was the name of the company and a title. This is your visual CV, if you want to look at it that way, for your business. And so you want to use compelling keywords. You want compelling content. Content is the name of the game. As my friends over at HubSpot would say, you need to learn, as part of being a great salesperson, you've got to learn how to become an inbound marketer. And so you want to have content that is engaging. If you're not using applications, go into the LinkedIn applications section. It's all part of the free service. Set up a SlideShare account. Share presentations, add a video. If you go to my profile, you see I have a video, I have book lists, I have blog posts that feed. The great thing about using the content is not only is it more compelling and more interesting, and I'm here to tell you, every client engagement I have closed in the past 9 months, every single customer mentions the content on the profile, the video, how my content stood out. They see status updates and the information I share. These things are your brand opportunity, and you really want to leverage them. Here's the other awesome thing about that, because you should never just create a profile and then go dark and never go back, right? You need to make sure you're changing up that content, because when you do, your network becomes alerted, and fresh content is really the name of the game. Now, a couple tips on that though. Keep it relevant and keep it specific to your brand and who you are and what you want to be known for. So I like to joke around and say that, I love reading People magazine on the weekend, but I'm not tweeting about stuff out of People magazine. I stay true to my business focus: sales, social media, technology, and business in general. And Coca, I know you've had some great sessions. I know you've got another one coming up, I believe, in a few weeks to get into LinkedIn in more depth. And I encourage people to get into that, right? Because LinkedIn is a lot more than inviting connections. And so now I'm going to share with you probably one of my most favorite lead generation tips for you when using LinkedIn. So first, you want to, a lot of people know how to search, so you can search out a person, and that's all well and good. But what a time waster if you're constantly searching for individuals or constantly going in and searching on, a title, and just have to do that over and over again. When you go into LinkedIn, if you just look up at the top of the navigation bar all the way to the far right, you see something called Advanced Search. And so when you click on that, you get just like the screenshot we have here for you now, you get a page that looks like this, where you can set up a search. It can be based on keywords. I've got this one set up on title. You can then break it down by geographic location and industry. Now, I am showing you what's available in the basic version, and you can do 3 saved searches, which I'm going to talk about in a second. You'll also notice in this screenshot that you see the in symbols next to seniority and groups. Well, that's because I have an upgraded membership. I'm at the lowest of the 3 levels, and I did that for a couple of reasons. One being I wanted to do deeper dives in search, getting into the size of the company and that sort of thing. So if we go ahead and look at the next screenshot, once I set up that search and then I hit search and run it, I get a list of all the results matching the criteria. And in this case, I set it up as first level connections, second level connections, and groups. You can do the 3rd level, but truthfully, I don't use that a lot. I tend to really work first, second, and groups to my advantage, which is why being in the right kind of group that's got size and some meat to it can really aid you in your lead generation efforts. But now here's the really important thing about doing this. You then click on the Save button. And the reason you want to do that is because now you're allowing the LinkedIn technology to go to work for you. And it's a beautiful thing. What it does is every week on a Monday, right around noonish Eastern time, you receive an email with a list of all the new results matching that search criteria. Now think about that for a moment. So if Coca and Kent and I are connected, and during the week Coca has connected with some people in his network matching my search criteria, guess what? That following Monday, they show up in my search list, and I am immediately alerted to that. this is a gold mine that you can then use to plan some strategies for how you're going to approach these people. You'll determine who you know, how you can secure that referral or introduction or whatever it might be. But when you get off the telephone, or if you're multitasking, do it now, but set up a search and let this really help you get to the prospects who are right for you more quickly. But the caveat there, yes.
A quick comment on that. I think this is one of those very overlooked processes that salespeople need to understand. And when I was in sales, how I leveraged this was, one, to set up the saved searches, but then I would set up watch lists, like what InsideView does, for example, with trigger events.
Absolutely.
So when I find these new connections, or when people attending the session, when you find these new people that match this criteria, and you leverage our tool or other tools to figure out how you're connected to this as a network, then use the trigger events based on something happening within that industry or within that company, and that's what you use to kind of break the ice. This is where you kind of separate yourself from being just some salesperson that calls in and says, I want to talk to you because you're the right contact, that the right level of contact that I'm supposed to be speaking with to try and sell my wares, to having a more intelligent conversation of, hey, I know who you are and I know the industry you're in, and this is the problems that I'm facing. Based on the research that I've done, is there something that you think I can help you out with? It's a much more intelligent conversation versus just reaching out to a list of people that come through your search results.
Well, that's absolutely right, Coca, and that's why, as you know, I became a big fan of InsideView and the tool, because the two work together. And the other thing that, if you aren't using InsideView right now, you need to know that if I'm looking at somebody on that list, okay, I need to get in to see Coca Sexton at InsideView, and I go into the tool and I look up the company and I look him up in the people list, he's got a LinkedIn profile. I mean, it is incredible how you can leverage this to your advantage. And so the other thing, though, you need to know about using things like search and LinkedIn, and it is very overlooked. And except for one time in I don't know how many years, most people never know that they can do that. But here's what you need to also recognize. You need a network that is a combination of quality plus quantity. And don't forget mixing in some savvy groups. So I'm going to give a shout out to my buddy Paul Castaigne. He's got an amazing sales group on LinkedIn called Sales Playbook. Highly recommend it. Very focused on dialogue between sales folks, answering questions, helping each other with problems and whatever. It's not a selling platform. But you want to have good quality and quantity, right? Because it's more than just likes on Facebook or a whole lot of connections on LinkedIn. It's got to be the right connections and the relevant ones. Look for influencers with strong networks, people that can help you get into opportunities and you can help them. All of this leads to a great success. And as we get into now the next section, talking about building that credibility, we're going to talk to you about how that applies using the Sell Excel methodology, and then I'll come back and just reinforce how using social technology can support that as well.
Great. Establishing your credibility, I think we all agree, is extremely important when working to leverage our relationships with client executives. I want to show you part of the research here, what has to happen in meetings with salespeople for the executive to feel it was effective. You see, number 4, displayed knowledge of my industry. While it was important, ranked number 4. It is still really important. The other 3 are pretty easy to actually accomplish. And number 2, to define that a little bit better, it's when the client executive feels understood. And that always takes a lot of listening and research, as well as it turned out in the later research studies, these continue to go on, number 3 became number 1, that a salesperson listened before proposing a solution. All 4 of these are extremely important to develop credibility. I want to look at credibility a little bit closer. The 2 components of credibility are capability and integrity. Executives are looking for you to demonstrate capability, but if you do just that, you may be perceived as an extra pair of hands or perhaps even an expert for hire. And you also have to demonstrate integrity. And if you do just that, you could be perceived as just reliable and trustworthy. Those are pretty notable traits. However, you may also be perceived as a friend to the executive. The combination of the two, when you operate on both planes, you operate in what we call the client value zone. And here's where you become perceived as a trusted advisor. And most importantly, here is where the relationship can become collaborative. What I mean by that is the executive will do something for you in addition to you doing something for him or her. Very, very important. You're looking what has the executive done with you or for you begins to indicate whether or not a trusted advisor relationship actually exists. Barber.
Thank you, Ken. That's great. And you know, here's the thing that I really like about
Barbara.
Sorry about that. I'm here. What I really like about that, Kent, is that you know, there's a lot of talk out there, and Coca, you probably agree with this. There's a lot of talk out there about how important it is to become a trusted advisor. Not many people really talk about the traits and why it's so important. And, you know, I think it's a given that we've got to know our industry, right? I mean, and the customer's industry, and we got to know our own products and that sort of thing. And my favorite really is that listening. I mean, the old joke is we had 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And so, you know, it is so, and even today, again, getting back to the notion that we have got so much amazing current, you know, real-time information at our fingertips, it is critically important that we are doing the homework and making sure that we are really demonstrating that we know the industry that we are, you know, of the prospect we're trying to get in front of. Just really, really important.
Yeah, and you know, to kind of, you know, levy off of that in being a trusted advisor and that expertise as a salesperson, I think that's another thing that salespeople tend to overlook, and sales managers don't really put a lot of emphasis on. But as a salesperson, as a professional trying to build on your career as well as, you know, build your bank account because you want to make more deals, you have to put yourself in a position where you are seen as an expert. You may not be the thought leader, but you want to be somebody that can be the go-to person that can answer questions and can help somebody out. And as a salesperson, that's what I did within networks like LinkedIn and Twitter and some other professional networks. I hardly ever sold my solution. If somebody wanted to know what I did, they would click through to my profile, and, you know, I made it very clear what I did and who I worked for. But I would spend the time to go into these areas and answer a question in a week or a couple questions a week. You know, it wasn't a major time suck from me, but, you know, that small shift in paying attention to what was being said out there or what questions were being asked made a huge impact on how many people would then come to me. And that was where I started, you know, really understanding that this inbound engine of having people come to me to, you know, as an advisor really started to pay off. So I think that's, you know, you're going through this is excellent, because I think that salespeople need to understand that there is power within this, and this will help you out beyond, you know, the immediate goal, you know, the short-term goals. This will be something that kind of brings value back to you, you know, for years to come.
Yeah, it really does. And you know what? You know, I sometimes hear people say, well, it takes time. And of course it does. But you know what? Do you want to stand out better than the competition? And put a little extra time into it. And by the way, once you get the hang of it, it just becomes an ingrained part of your overall sales process. It is just so easy. So to support one of the things that Coca said, and look, I can tell you 5 things you can do. 15 minutes a day with LinkedIn, though once you get the hang of it, you probably use it a little bit more. But for example, you know, in that 15 minutes, I can go into the LinkedIn Answers section. I can use that to either answer a question. I can use it to peruse and do a search to find out what kinds of conversations are happening about my industry. I can, you know, use that as a way, because by the way, I'm going to tell you right now, first of all, that's open to all the 135 million plus LinkedIn users. You don't have to join a group at that point. And there are a lot of people who ask questions about what products, what services they should buy, and from whom, and what was the experience with the company. So all kinds of ways to establish that credibility. In core groups, as Coca mentioned, and I'm a huge fan of this, pick core groups. some that are probably related to your profession, but others that have to do with your customer's industry. Think about where your client is likely to be participating. You get the opportunity to ask and answer questions, not sell, but contribute value. And remember earlier on I mentioned that you've got to be visible, you've got to be engaged, and you have to be patient. And frankly, this is really no different than solid offline marketing. I don't walk into a networking event and assume I'm going to walk out with $1 million deal. That's as much about creating, relationship and starting starting a conversation with someone that leads, hopefully, to something down the road. So, as Coca said, these things are overlooked in LinkedIn, and the savvy salespeople who really want to maintain competitive advantage will really work it to their advantage. So let's see what Kent now has to tell us about as we're moving forward in terms of really driving that trusted advisor status home with the customers we want to do business with.
Absolutely, driving the trusted advisor status home, as well as being able to really triage the kind of research that you're doing. And that's what I'm going to work on in the next few minutes. So the first thing is understanding the client's business. You need to be aware and take note of key changes that are taking place in your client's business. Look for those in your research setup. Make sure you're using InsideView and other sources to look for, what's happening in clients' organizations, internally and externally. And again, these are the business drivers. Each of these factors could create the need for change in your client's organization. The client will typically put initiatives, projects, or plans in place to address these drivers. And then lastly, we really want to look and see if we can even identify any breakthrough initiatives that the client must act on. It's deemed so critical to the client's success because either there's a significant payback that can result from its implementation or a serious consequence if the project is delayed or not acted upon. This breakthrough initiative might be so critical that it could actually reshape the company's destiny. So if you have a solution that addresses this breakthrough initiative, it's phenomenal value. It's going to get the client's attention, particularly at the executive level. And why particularly at the executive level? Because others in the organization below that typically are not aware of these kinds of initiatives, or they don't understand them. Let's examine the concept of business drivers just a little bit more in detail. So business drivers come in a variety of forms, originating either internally or externally. Internal drivers are things like operations and finance. Increasing revenues or decreasing expenses would be some examples of financial drivers. External factors would include things like customer retention. That can be a significant issue for many companies today, or loss of market share. It might represent another key factor. Emergence of non-traditional competitors, or something that's happening more and more today. Firms that are your business partners today can become your competitors. So you need to examine each of these factors and determine how your solution can either address the pain or accelerate the payback for the client. One of the things we promised to make sure today is, what questions should you answer before an initial face-to-face call on an executive? You want to develop questions that you're consistently answering for yourself about all client opportunities you're pursuing. Ideally, sort them by business driver. I just actually completed this exercise for a client, and it is a lot of work. You need to be armed with these you need to be armed with the answers to these types of questions prior to the initial meeting. So the kinds of answers that you would want in advance is, how do the financial metrics of this company, prospective client company or client company, compare to similar sized companies in the same industry? The competitive pressure that you might want to have the answer to is, which specific competitors pose the biggest potential threat to the company over the next 3 to 5 years. So really understanding these kinds of drivers and doing our homework and being able to bring all that together allows us to approach the client executive on the initial face-to-face call. And when we can actually cite some of the work that we have done to understand their organization, we most likely will receive credit. But what are some of the questions you never want to ask a client executive? I'm going to give you a couple of them. What are the top 3 business objectives? If you're working with a fairly good-sized organization, I would say you should absolutely be able to know that in advance. So the better question might be, I understand your top 3 business objectives to be X, Y, and Z. Which one is most important to you and why? The question you might not want to ask is, what plans does your company have to expand into the global marketplace? The bottom line is you do not want to ask a question whose answer could be found from another source. And during your initial face-to-face meeting, make sure that you're not just reciting the research, but you're linking it to the types of initiatives that are happening in their environment and the kinds of potential solutions that you have that you may be able to help them address, and relate it potentially to other situations that you've helped them address those solutions. Which brings me to summarizing the value of client learning, and then we'll go into just briefly creating your value. So in value of client learning, it enables you to provide what clients, with knowledge, that you have the knowledge of their business. Really important. It represents the easiest way to develop genuine and lasting rapport. When executives see that you've done your research, wow, that really helps boost credibility. And they begin to believe that you understand and that you are on your path to a place where the executive feels they are understood. It's going to help you generate the ultimate compliment. You really do understand our business. I'm really impressed. It shortens your sales cycle by quickly differentiating you and your company from your competitors. It enables you to be in a better position to serve as a consultant to your client, contributing insights, and creating the foundation for collaborative relationships. Collaborative relationships are talked about frequently, but really when we go into looking at the value proposition, there are 3 important elements, and these elements need to include a collaborative conversation. We should not be in the position of simply delivering a value proposition, but creating it with client executives. The first one is your personal value. What do you bring to the relationship to this company? Your experience, your background. What kind of resources can you bring to the company to help this client achieve their breakthrough initiative? And what's the value of your solution? What's the specific business value, and can it be integrated into the client's environment? And from a competitive standpoint, the larger that we can create the value, the greater likelihood is that we will have an opportunity to win this business. And that's really one of the most significant roles of a professional salesperson. So summarizing our findings, Barbara, do you want to take this or do you want me to move forward?
Oh, go right ahead, Kent. You're doing a great job.
All right. So remember, one of the things is executives get involved early in the decision process, but they also get involved late in the process to measure to review the implementation and measure the results. One of the ways to secure return access to an executive that you're already doing business with is to take this opportunity. Let them know that you're going to come back to them and you're going to review the success of the project. Very important. The relevant executive, this is a great concept, and there is only one relevant executive in every sales opportunity. It's very important that we look at the informal structures in organizations so that we clearly can understand how decisions are being made and who is that one individual who has the most to gain or lose by the outcome of the project or application in which your solution addresses. Using a person who's credible inside the organization or outside the organization is really important. Kind of linking back to some of the conversations Barber's had with us when you're going to your LinkedIn profile and you identify people who may be a second-level connection. One of the questions you want to ask them before simply asking them to make an introduction is, tell me more about the relationship you have with this executive. And it's our job to determine, is that relationship a credible relationship? Very important. Demonstrating capability and integrity over the long run does allow us to become perceived as a trusted advisor. Being perceived as a trusted advisor, one of the ways that you will know that you have arrived at that status is that client executive is doing things for you and with you to help not only advance your campaigns internally, but also potentially helping you outside of the organization, making introductions into other client accounts. I have a whole list of things there. It's pretty fascinating. And always remember, go back and consistently communicate the value that you have delivered. That's one of the projects I was working on this morning for a significant client relationship going through, and I'm preparing for final stages of a meeting tomorrow with a client executive and his team. Remember, it's important to consistently communicate that value. Barbara?
Thanks, Ken. And, and so I hope throughout the course of the session we're going to have a few minutes if people have some questions, and Coco, you may have some other thoughts. But, social media and technology is really an enabler, right? It's kind of like putting gas in the car. It helps you, to shrink the sales cycle. You can get ahead of new opportunities more quickly. You can get to the relevant executive. You can do your homework on key initiatives and that sort of thing. But it does not make up for, a sales approach that's not working anymore, or if you're spending too much time talking to the wrong people, or if you haven't answered some of the compelling questions that Kent talked about. And my favorite, of course, is, can we reasonably expect to win? And as I just sent out a tweet, the answer is not always yes. And I know that's hard. It was hard for members of my sales team sometimes. It's hard for them, it's hard to sort of look at it really honestly and saying, well, I don't know that this timing is right, and I don't really think that we have a chance to win. We've come late to the party. I think you've just got to do that due diligence. So remember that using social media, it augments and integrates into your sales process, but it's not a standalone, and it's a mix of online and offline. But you can use it to build the network, increase referral opportunities, generate those leads, build your credibility. Hey, keep an eye on what's happening with your competition. I mean, it really has tremendous value, but I can't stress enough how important it is that you use it in a way that helps further the process, but it's not the process. So, Coca, that's really what we've got today. We wanted to try and keep it informative, give people some things that maybe were a little tactical that they could start to put into action today. But, the bottom line is, if, people don't take the information and do something with it, they're not going to get a different sort of a result. So we hope that those of you who have been listening into the session today will take a few of these tidbits and put them into action. And then feel free, to connect with us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and let us know what your thoughts are around some of the things that we presented. But you know what? Here's the deal. Social business is here. And for anyone who's selling, you need to really amp up your game in terms of elevating, evolving, and continuing to develop your great sales skills, as well as marrying that to great techniques using technology like LinkedIn and InsideView to really help you, get ahead of opportunities and present yourself to that executive in a light that's more favorable than your competition. So we really appreciated the opportunity, Coca. Any questions, thoughts, anything else that you think we ought to cover that we didn't, or questions from the group?
Well, I'll open it up to everybody in attendance. Be sure to ask your questions. We got a few extra minutes here. I wanted to kind of just add a couple things. One of the things that I found, for most of my sales career, I was the inside sales rep. I rarely got out to see my customers, so most of the stuff that I dealt with was over the phone or leveraging a WebEx or something along those lines. When the generation before me was in sales, it was mostly field based. I mean, as you had alluded to earlier, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, people didn't think that you could sell anything through email, but now we realize that's very possible. Field-based salespeople used to have the opportunity to walk into an office and see pictures on a desk, awards on a wall, whatever it may be, that gave you some context to who these people were that you were trying to sell to. And as you had mentioned earlier, people buy from people. So we have to find these commonalities, these things that bring us together as people so that we can start building that trust and that rapport. because we don't have that opportunity, and for myself and many of the people that are attending as inside salespeople, we don't have that opportunity to see what's going on in our prospects' lives, so to speak, by walking into their office. But by leveraging technology and getting setting up alerts where you're actually getting fed this information on your prospects and the companies and the industries that they're in, I find that you don't need to walk in their office. You're able to see photos of things they're sharing, trips they've taken. All of these things that will now allow you to add context around who this person is, as opposed to just being some contact in your CRM.
Well, I think that's just a tremendous point, and I used to joke, Coke, and I still do. I remember the days when I went into this building called a library to do research.
Yeah.
I mean, things have really changed, right? And there's so much opportunity here for savvy sales folks who recognize that this truly is a competitive advantage. You have an opportunity to really rock this stuff, and I'm about to jump onto a roundtable where we're actually going to continue this conversation and talking about how you use a combination. You can't always get to somebody face-to-face, or now we can use webinars or video or the phone. But the reality is this technology helps salespeople be much more successful, and so I hope that we've convinced just a few others that it's not a nice-to-have and it's not an add-on. It's a must-have.
Absolutely. So I want to thank both of you. I think that, Barb, we've had you on a couple of different webinars in the past with Social Selling University, and, now having the addition of Kent, I can see that, the conversations are being elevated, which are nice. We're bringing it to a different level. So I appreciate both of you being a part of this and kind of sharing your knowledge with our community. And I'm sure that there'll be some follow-up questions either in our LinkedIn group or that we will get through our own InsideView community. We'll make sure that we get all of those answered.
That sounds great.
I wanted to
Thank
take one moment and send out a little appreciation to a company called Fusion Alliance, who seems to have been the largest tweeter during this event. There seems to be about 7 of these salespeople online that are talking about this webinar in real time. So to all of you Fusion Alliance people, good going.
Well, yeah, and thank you very much. And thanks for having us, Coke. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well. And this webinar will be online shortly. So thank you all very much, and we will talk to you shortly.